Welcome back, everyone, to the Two Stewards Show. My name is Brent Vanderwood, and I'm here with Mark Cricky.
Hi.
Hi, Mark. Today, we are talking about something quite timely. We had a whole bunch of other topics we wanted to discuss, but we just said, hey, you know what? Hamilton, the city that we live in, is poised to license Airbnb-style rentals starting in June, and it is June.
Yeah.
So it's actually getting to the end of June. So we wanted to pick a guy's brain who knows a little bit more about the specifics of these new regulations and can give us a little bit of information. And who better to talk to than Mark Cricky?
Hey, how you doing?
So very timely, Mark. Thanks for being willing to share some of your expertise on this topic. It's like we
Thanks,
have
Brent.
It's like we have a guest on today.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Do you even listen? I don't know. I listen to a couple.
I listen.
Yeah. They're pretty good, eh?
For the soothing sound of your voice when I need to get to sleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, Airbnb regulations.
Okay, so why are they putting in regulations? That's my question. Like, wasn't it good before? And now that, like, does the government need to get involved in everything that we do? Or is there actually reason that we have new regulations coming in? Like, give us some perspective behind what's going on here.
I mean, does the government need a reason to get involved in everything? That is the nature of government, right?
Okay.
Well, I mean, on a more philosophical level,
So
you
we're
just see that,
yeah.
how government encroaches more and more on life in general, and that's just the nature of government to want to, and bureaucracy.
Right,
yeah, exactly. Why not? But yeah, it is the nature of government and bureaucracy to want to increase its purview, its domain, until it just stifles everything. But yeah, that's maybe a little deeper than we need to go here.
Yeah,
So,
I think everybody here is already thoroughly stifled and fully encroached upon.
Exactly.
So
yeah, so there's a couple of reasons, and there's some are a little bit more surface than others. So one that's commonly cited would be party houses.
okay,
Right? All these complaints they get from these party houses that people are renting out on the weekends, and it's lots of noise and all kinds of stuff, right? So yeah, that has happened, and it's
and those are basically only identified, like people are identifying a party house just by the fact that someone calls the bylaw officer and says, hey, I heard this big party going on. It's not like the city's sending out people
no
looking around in the evenings.
No,
Okay.
it's the no.
I want to get that job. Your job is to find the parties.
It used to be my job when I was in my teens. Not so much anymore. No, but
We don't want to give the government any good ideas for more programs.
Yeah, exactly. Let's edit that out. Yeah. No, so what happened? Like that has been an issue in a few isolated incidents, and it's typically what it is: a few isolated incidents. Especially as Airbnb or short-term rentals, as that market has matured, people realize like there's no value in having a quote-unquote party house.
Yeah.
Because what happens is your house gets trashed.
Yeah.
Right? And unless you're charging a huge amount, I know there's a place, I think in Burlington, it was like this mansion on the lake where they would charge like, ridiculous amount, knowing full well that people were going to host parties, and they're just like, whatever gets wrecked.
That was their business model.
Yeah.
They priced in replacing all the furniture after every party.
Possibly, yeah. I don't know all the specifics, but clearly they knew full well what was going on. Right. But that's
how
not
did the
a
city
sustainable.
react in that case? Like, are they? They must have. This is a while ago.
So that's the frustration with those things, because what do they have in place?
Right.
You can send down bylaw and even cops to shut down a noisy party, right?
Yeah.
But that's always reactive, right?
Right.
There's, like you said, there's not somebody driving around like, oh, party, like boom, let's nip it in the bud, right? So then and if there's a noisy party, it's not like the cops are gonna walk in and like, everybody out, shut it down, right? They'll try to find out like who's responsible, and guys, can you turn it down a bit? And like by the time the whole process goes through, the party's over.
Yeah,
and,
Mark's gone home. And
Yeah, exactly. Taking my Ferrari and gotten out of there. But like it's a process, right? And then when it happens every single weekend,
yeah,
like everybody's just sick of dealing with it, right? And there's no real regulations in place
to prevent
someone from doing this week after week. Right. So, right, they can shut down the party week after week, but there's nothing to say like you can't ever do that again here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was one example, and there's maybe one or two in Hamilton as well. But the problem is they get a lot of press. And if you have like a couple neighbors that are dealing with this one thing consistently, they're going to make a lot of noise, right? And I talked to one of the counselors, and he was all about, it's party house. I'm like, okay,
you got
Dom,
2
that's
phone
like,
calls.
Well, maybe he may have gotten them like every weekend. Right. I don't know, because somebody was sick of dealing with it, right? So now, out of the
wasn't me. I didn't call.
Out of the, what do we have, around 1,300-ish, probably a little bit less, 1,100 Airbnbs in Hamilton. If there's one or two that are hosting parties all the time and causing problems, it's, is it really a problem? It's a problem for the neighbors that are there. So, figure something out, I guess, right? So that's one reason that is frequently touted, but like in the grand scheme of things, it's not really an issue. The one that is more also mentioned is housing affordability, right? You don't have to go very far to find an article on housing unaffordability, I guess, right? And we've talked about this quite a bit in previous episodes. Yeah. And like, what is the cause of that? So we look at, our money system, population growth, all that stuff, right? Yeah, so in general,
supply being really tight.
Yeah, in general, our money system, our economic system is what's creating housing unaffordability. And then you add on top of that, in the GTA, population growth like we've had, and then just in the last 2 years, massive population growth happening. Like, it's a perfect storm, right? Yeah, just driving up real estate prices.
Area.
Yeah,
like having all this density, and then having, cities left going, oh shoot, we got to build houses, we got to find places to put all these people. What are we gonna do?
And when you look at, like, you get the Minister of Housing doing an announcement like, we're investing $1 billion to build 37 units or something, right?
Yeah.
And you're like,
first of all, where did you get that billion dollars? And where are you going to find the people to build all these houses?
And like does it actually get built? And like they're always delayed and not on time and so forth. But they'll make a big announcement about building a few dozen units. Yeah. It's like, we need hundreds of thousands. Yeah. Right? And like, so the government clearly can't solve that, but they're just kind of stumbling around. And it's symptomatic of the issue that we're looking at here as well, is that they're making announcements in the hopes that, well, maybe they'll do something, but you build 40 units, great. Yeah. At like twice the cost of what it would cost a private developer. You're not doing anything, right? Yeah. The problem is our system.
I guess what the way you're doing is set up, buying votes, right? Or you're showing to people that you care, saying that you care.
It's I can't forget the word, but like you're making a big show out of you're virtue signaling. Yeah. More or less, right? Like, I really care about this, but we're going to run massive deficits every year and pump all that money into the economy, knowing full well it inflates asset prices. Yeah. Like, you're not helping. So
how does that tie into Airbnb regulations? Because like housing affordability, so you said, like, obviously we have a big crisis. Yeah. And we just, in the last minute, wrote an article about housing unaffordability. But what's the problem with Airbnb then?
Well, so this is the reason that city councils will use, and certainly what Hamilton City Council has used.
Because so they're saying basically, what's their argument? Like, Airbnb people are buying up houses and using them as Airbnbs, and they could be housing units for families.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just trying to pick my words, because nitwits is what came to mind. But that's probably not the the word I should be using. But
greatest word.
Just like people are not super well informed and have an agenda, right? So again, I've said it before, like this is low hanging fruit, right? If you have a housing crisis, and it's not necessarily up to city councils to solve the housing crisis because they don't print money. They don't bring in 1 million immigrants every year.
They're kind of reactive.
They're reactive, right? But they need to look like they're doing something.
Yeah.
And so banning Airbnbs or banning short-term rentals or regulating them is like, that's, hey, look, we're doing something, right?
Yeah.
When really you're not doing anything, guys. It's
not moving the needle for the problems.
No, it's not going to move the needle, and it's also just going to be ineffective.
Yeah.
We've seen that for Toronto, where they introduced pretty restrictive legislation, and
that's going back a couple years.
Yeah, that's a few years ago now. And when you look at 2017 versus now, it's almost the same number of units. There was a dip.
Yeah.
And that regulation came in, and now it's right back up. So that tells me one thing. First off, your legislation is ineffective.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever you said and however you're policing it, it's not working because the goal was to reduce the amount of short-term rentals in the city.
Yeah.
So that there would be more long-term housing stock available.
Yeah. So if some guy's got a condo in Toronto downtown and he can Airbnb it beside like the Blue Jays Stadium for way more than he could get as a long-term rental, he's going to do that all day long.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're trying to tackle those people, get them out of there so that it could be a long-term rental. Wow.
Yeah. And so specifically to that point, there's a few towers like ICE condos downtown that are they're still all Airbnb. So is there no policing of it? Like,
do all the police
what's happening?
Own Airbnbs? Well, we're in Canada, so I don't know how corrupt, bad this.
Yeah, but the point is, it's not been effective. So the rules in Toronto are it has to be your principal residence that you're renting out, or a portion thereof.
Okay.
And it can only be for 180 nights per year. Right. So total, as a short-term rental, so that would be 28 days or less, and so a lot of people abide by that, and then lots of people don't, because you can't tell me that the difference, from 2017 to now, has been made up by people just renting rooms or
in their primary
units
residence.
in their primary residence. There's no chance.
So is this the same regulation that Hamilton's proposing? We'll get into exactly kind of what they're breaking, like what they are proposing, but is that the same sort of thing as Toronto, or is
it was similar and it got watered down?
Okay. Good.
Yeah, good for Airbnb owners, I guess. It's still not great, I think. But anyways, getting back to your question, like why do they do it? So it's, part of it is pressure from constituents calling them.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, there's the very simple ways to get rid of the party houses without doing this. And then part of it is either trying to look good, right? By let's pass this because, we have an issue. There's also tie-ins to provincial funding, which I'll get to in a minute. But some people it was stated actually, Hamilton City Council, because we went and lobbied with a number of Airbnb enthusiasts, I guess we'll call ourselves.
Junkies.
Yeah.
You're a junkie.
Yes. I can't get enough, man. No, it was stated by one councillor that they would just like to get rid of all short-term rentals in the city, period. Like just wipe them out, get rid of them.
Really?
Well, and this is coming from a very leftist, I guess the easiest way to describe it, perspective, right? Where like people are making money, we don't really like that. People are making money from housing, we don't really like that. I get the feeling that if they could also stop people making money from long-term rentals, they would do that as well, right? With very strict regulations. So that's not the majority of city council, but there's a few. And anyways, that's it. So the other thing is that there's pressure from the provincial government to increase housing affordability. Okay. And so do something about housing, right? The Ford government has been working on this very hard to And they've gotten so much criticism from, like, oh, you're just feeding your greedy developer buddies. Like, there's probably 6 big developers in Ontario.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's lots of little ones.
Yeah.
But in terms of the bigger ones, there's not many. So, yeah, there's a clearly defined group of people who might benefit. But they're also the ones building the housing. We need more housing. So the Ford government's trying to do whatever they can to increase housing. And then there's some funding and stuff that will happen for municipalities, right? From the provincial government. So and this was mentioned as well, like we got a mandate from the provincial government to build more housing, and Airbnb isn't helping with this. So let's axe it, right? So there's a few different kind of angles that people
They're
are
kind of between a rock
from.
and a hard place. Like their superiors, like the province is saying, you got to do this target, you got to do this. And then the constituents and the people living in the city, the neighbors are saying, well, we don't like this. And we got to change something. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, and again, we lobbied the city. There's lots of letters written. I spoke at council. Number of people did. There's a lot of alternatives that could have worked. And so like I'll just go through it quickly, I guess, right? So first, like look at the numbers. I figured out the number of short-term rentals in Hamilton. And again, the highest number you would see is about 1,400. That doesn't take into account double listings where somebody might have 3 rooms in their house and they list all 3 rooms on Airbnb plus the whole house.
Right.
So that's 4 listings, but it's actually only 1 property.
Right.
Right. So if you take those away, and there's a number of those, you're probably closer to like 1,000 or 1,100.
Okay.
Or so. And that worked out to less than 1% of the available housing stock in Hamilton. So, like, what are you doing, guys?
And how many of those 1,100 or 1,400 are like actual full-time investment properties that are?
Yeah, so roughly a quarter are rooms. So rooms in somebody's house. So you're not changing anything with this rule. Yeah. Right? And then you're going to have a large percentage that are also secondary units on people's properties. Yeah. And I don't know what that number is. It's harder to get that data.
Like a basement apartment?
Yeah, like renting out the basement, for example, which we did.
Or you have a garage and you got a thing above your garage.
Exactly. So lots of people do that as well. And let's say that's another 25%. I don't know. Could be that. It could be more. But, you're down to like 500 or so. Yeah. Right? And is that really out of the entirety of
I feel like stock in Hamilton? One hotel would have 500 rooms. That's like essentially one hotel, 2, maybe 3, 4 hotels. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, we don't have any big ones in Hamilton like that, but
downtown there's some decent sized hotels.
Yeah, but the crazy thing is, like, people have done estimates or have done studies, and even like the county of Norfolk did one. Estimating like how much tax revenue comes in. It's something like $73 a person, like per person that stays in a short-term rental, comes in like ancillary spending. So when they come to Hamilton to stay in a short-term rental,
that's just in Norfolk.
Yeah, there were some estimates for Hamilton as well, and it was around the same amount that people are bringing this money into the economy. Yeah. So, you can make the argument like, oh, we should, everything should be devoted strictly to housing, right? That's a little short-sighted because then we got to close down all the hotels, turn them into condos, or make that land into whatever, an apartment building or something, right? Like, no, we realize that we're sacrificing some of our land to build a hotel because that generates tourism dollars. Yeah. And we need tourism dollars. Like Hamilton, believe it or not, gets money has a tourism board and gets money from tourism because people come into Hamilton to do stuff. Yeah. And that generates money for our local economy.
So even if the hotel, even if the hotel's not filled all the time, it's worth having that zone as a hotel so that you can have that. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a distinction that cities have made for a long time, right? They could not allow hotels, but like you need them, right? Go to New York, there's 1 million hotels because that's a huge part of their economy is tourism, right?
Go to Las Vegas.
Yeah, yeah. Like anywhere.
Are there any houses in Las Vegas?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyways, the point is, like, this is a valid segment of the market, and a lot of people will only come to places that have Airbnbs.
Yeah.
So, like, for example, I'm one of those. I'll never go somewhere and almost never go somewhere and stay in a hotel. Right, the odd time I have just with my wife for like a quick getaway, and maybe it's a hotel with a spa in it or something where we can, like, just kind of chill, go to the spa, go to the restaurant, go back to our room.
Yeah.
But in general, if I'm traveling with the family, I'm looking at places that have Airbnbs.
Yeah.
And if there's no Airbnb close there, I'm not going there.
Yeah.
And that applies to Hamilton as well. There are tons of people who come to Hamilton because there are Airbnbs available. And typically we're not taking business away from hotel rooms, right?
Yeah.
There are some where it might be, like we have some places we manage that it's just one room. So it would be either a single person or a couple. And that is competing with hotels. But when you got a family, if I'm bringing like 4 kids, myself and my wife, and then maybe like an in-law or 2.
And try and jam them into a hotel room.
Yeah, we've done that in the past, and it's terrible. I hate it. You got like half the kids in one room, half in the other.
You don't know what they're doing.
Well, I don't care if they're with my in-laws. Like, go eat sugar. I don't care.
It gives you a license to eat sugar when you're.
But as opposed to, I can go rent a house, and we have a living room and a dining room and a backyard. I can cook there if I want to.
Yeah, have a barbecue.
And we can just like chill at the house. The house is an actual destination now.
Yeah.
As opposed, like a hotel is never a destination.
You don't have to spend extra money on other things. And I'd imagine too, you'd get more people who are locals, because we talked about this when we were talking about tenant screening and how it's a bit of a red flag when you have someone local. Yep. And they're booking last minute and it's a one-night stay. But if you have someone local who's looking for a getaway just for like, a weekend next August or whatever. Yeah. Right. And they can't go far because they have other obligations, but they just want an experience. Like Airbnb, I think, offers a good experience compared to a hotel, right? Like you're going to get those dollars as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we won't typically stay in Hamilton as a getaway. But like Southern Ontario, right? We've done that a few times, right? You find a place that's not too far. Yeah. So I can drive for like an hour with the kids. They're not driving me crazy in the car. And then we can still have a little, it's somewhere else. Yeah. So it's still a getaway, it's right? A fun experience. And people can come to Hamilton and do the same thing, right? Especially if there's events happening or whatever. So, point is, there's tourism dollars to be had, and they're very real. And short-term rentals have opened up a new category for tourism. People who would not have come to Hamilton if the only option was staying in a hotel.
Okay.
So
they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah, and my point was and is that, like, charge a tourism tax, right? A lot of municipalities do that. It'll be like a 3 or a 4% tax. Yeah. Like a municipal accommodation tax or whatever.
And then you make more
on
money
top of your Airbnb fees. Airbnb collects it, remits it to the city, and you're increasing your income. Then if you want to do something about housing, take those dollars and put that towards housing.
Right.
Right.
So these are some of the comments that you made at the city council meeting when you were lobbying.
Yeah.
Were you wearing a leather jacket or?
No, I think I wore a suit jacket. The beard
trim the beard.
I combed it.
Did you get any feedback, or it's just here's the information you guys?
Yeah, they're just like, okay, thank you very much. Next, right? Yeah. And like we wrote letters and stuff as well with all the same information, and a number of people did, right? Hitting from all different angles, right? And then also some practical, if you want to get rid of party homes, then just ban one-night stays. Yeah. Like, no skin off my nose, right? Yeah. We don't do them anyways. And for the people that do, they probably shouldn't. Yeah. So make it a 2-night or even a 3-night minimum stay.
You should just make it mandatory to call Mark.
I suggested that too, and they didn't take that one. No, but there's a number of things that they could have done. So,
So I think that covers the reason why we need or why the city thinks they need regulations.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay, so that's
me-
the framework
that's me
for
venting.
like the context for what the regulations are. So you're happy with that explanation?
Yeah, more. Yeah,
I mean, you could talk for another hour about it.
I could.
Okay, so we're gonna try and jump into what the actual regulations are.
Yes.
So what are
Okay, so for Hamilton,
they're similar to Toronto, but
well, so they had on the table was a Toronto style regulation. So 180 nights. Actually, I think it was even less what they had proposed, but like a maximum number of nights that you could actually rent the place out
yeah,
for, and then after that you could not rent it out anyway. So effectively that kills your short-term rental because
Right.
you can't, like, how could you rent it out for a quarter of the year or half of the year?
and then,
And then what do you do with the rest?
Yeah.
Right? You've got a furnished place. Like you can't, and there actually are strategies around that, but to their mind, that would just discourage a lot of people from doing any short-term rental in the first place.
yeah,
So that was on the table, principal residents only, and then limited to.
and that's including the principal residence property as well.
Yeah, I think initially it was just your principal residence. So just like the idea behind a lot of these regulations initially, and for Toronto as well, as far as I can understand, was that if you own a house in Toronto and you want to go on vacation for 3 months, well, then you can rent your house out to somebody,
Right.
and then you come back and they leave. And like that's allowable, but that's the only way it's allowable, right?
Right.
So the rules have changed a little bit from that, but that was sort of the spirit behind the law. It wasn't to allow people to rent out part or all of their home as a short-term rental indefinitely,
Right.
right? And as I've said, there's plenty of benefits to that, especially tourism and tourism dollars. But that's not what was intended. So they have been changed. So that sort of spirit was what they had with the Hamilton regulations as well. So what happened during that meeting in January was they did make a number of changes and went back and forth, but they got rid of the nightly cap, the nightly maximum altogether.
This is Hamilton did this?
This is Hamilton
Okay.
now, yeah. So no nightly maximum, which, okay, that's pretty cool. And then they also allowed it to be not just the unit you live in, but any unit on your property.
Okay.
So that could be a detached unit, could be your basement, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
then it also is applicable to renters. So it's a principal occupant, not the
Right.
owner, but anybody who lives there. So if I rent out one of your properties
Yeah.
that has a
long-term
basement
rental.
yeah, that has a basement suite. I could rent out the basement if I'm just the renter. I could rent that out on Airbnb or another platform, and that would all be fine.
Right.
So now I should have your permission to do that. But
Yeah.
there are actually opportunities created for renters and for people who own their own home, right?
Right.
And what it may do is have the effect of weeding out a lot of their competition, because we've seen a lot of people just like shut down their Airbnbs. And this is anecdotal, but I've seen a ton of people like, oh, I'm closing it down. Who wants to buy my furniture?
Yeah.
And I was like, guys, wait. And this is what we advise their clients as well, is like, this is coming down. Let's wait and see what happens.
Right.
Right. But a lot of people just kind of knee-jerk reacted, got rid of their rentals.
Yeah, I think because if you're an investor and this is like you put all this money into a property and you have to make your mortgage payments and you have to pay the bills, and that's what the future of your investment relies upon. And then all of a sudden these regulations, you hear rumblings, this is going to happen, this is going to, make it a lot more difficult for you. Well, now you're taking a proactive approach and you're saying, I got to sell all my furniture, I got to transition to something else, long-term
Yeah.
rental, maybe even sell the property. Have you seen people selling their properties too?
Yeah.
That's a proactive approach for investors because they need to make money. So that's what I would look at too. What's a prudent step to do if I'm seeing these regulations come in? You're saying just wait and write it out, or what would be your recommendation?
Well, so I did make a recommendation. We wrote a letter to all our clients in Hamilton and said, like, can they actually implement this in the time frame that we're talking about, right? So late January was when the meeting was held and the bylaw was passed, and then it was ratified, I think, a week or 2 weeks later. So they wanted to implement a June 1st starting date. And I'm going like, this is government. That's less than 6 months for you to, like, you sort of have the framework of a program, like staff had done that, but you've still got to hire, or like advertise. Well, first of all, you got to flesh out your program now. So you need people to actually do that. And you're like, it's government, like it's city staff, right?
Yeah.
So they've got like 83 weeks of vacation per year.
If they don't call you, then they don't have a clue what's going on.
No, but like just the sort of glacial pace with which bureaucracy works. They got to develop the whole plan, then they got to start advertising and actually hire people to police the program and to oversee it. And then they've got to train those people in like 50-50 whether or not those people are actually any good. Yeah. Or maybe 80-20. But right, you've got but less than 5 months to implement all this. Like in my head, I'm thinking there's no chance they're going to meet that deadline. Yeah. Like no way. Yeah. And so this is what we kind of told people. And yeah, sure enough, people were trying to apply for licenses and they were getting pushed off. And by the staff,
just because there's no resources to process the licenses or
exactly because you want to be proactive. Okay, I'm going to get this. Oh yeah, that was another thing I forgot to mention. But licensing, so you have to, you got a license, and I think it was like approximately $900 for the first year, and then probably $300 a year to maintain after that. And most of that is a fire inspection, which that's not a bad thing, right? Yeah. Let's make sure units are safe. Yeah. People have different opinions on that because they're also rolling that out for long-term rentals in select wards and soon to be citywide, I think. Yeah. Licensing for any kind of rental. Yeah. So if you got a rental in Hamilton, but keep that on your radar. Yeah. Now, whether or not
rent's going up.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, you got fire inspections, and then if you don't pass, well, you got to make all the changes, right? And whether it's a legal unit or not, I don't think that'll be a focus, but it'll more be does it pass code for fire? Yeah. And that's most of what makes a legal unit anyways. Yeah. But all the other stuff, they'll probably just grandfather, like parking and whatever other regulations. But, the fire safety will be the big one. But there'll be costs associated with that. And then I'm thinking how many people are just going to shut down their rental because it's going to cost too much to get it up to code, right? Or sell the property. And either way, you're booting people out of unforeseen consequences, right? You're going to lessen housing stock, but
you're lessening the rental housing stock.
Yeah, yeah.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah,
which if you make there a fee for every other landlord to license, they're going to pass it on to the tenants somehow because they got to pay for it, and now there's increased rent from all the people who choose to license their places, and there's less places because all the people who thought it would be too expensive to make their place meet the licensing requirements or didn't want to go through the process, they're going to be paying more.
People are always complaining about the wealthy landlords and stuff, but this is just another way to tip it in favor of those who have more resources as opposed to the mom and pop who maybe this is just one more thing they can't afford, they can't do. Yeah. They're going to sell to an investor who's got a whole bunch of properties, right? Which I'm fine with, but a lot of people are like, oh, that's terrible. I don't know if you saw CMHC wants to really crack down on insured mortgages. So their guideline is for any person, one principal residence, one vacation or secondary residence, and then no more than 5 rental homes. That's what they are targeting. Yeah. And then for insured mortgages. So if you're an investor who's approaching that, good luck getting an insured mortgage, right? Through any of the major banks. If you want to buy that 6th rental property and provide somewhere for people to live, because private landlords account for at least 90% of all rental stock in Canada. But yeah, let's stomp all over. Anyways, that's my little rant, right? So they expect that credit unions and private lenders will take up the slack in, that sixth to 20, however many properties. So, okay, what's that going to do to rental prices?
Yeah.
It's going to increase them because, we've been insured with B lenders or mortgage with B lenders forever.
Yeah.
And it's another 2-3 percentage points.
Yeah.
And a lot of dollars per month. So if everybody's going to be in that boat, guess what? Rent's going up.
Yeah.
So,
and, CMHC.
Thanks, government.
CMHC is, how big is that? That's not just Hamilton.
No, that's Canada-wide.
So
Canada-wide.
If we're competing again, yeah.
So a little bit off track. I go on these rants, and we were worried that this would be a short episode. But yeah, let's get back to the
regulations. I don't even know so far what regulations you even said. So have you specifically given me any of the regulations?
I thought I did, but there's so the regulation is you need to get a license if you want to have a short-term rental. It has to be in your principal property. We'll call it principal property.
Yeah.
So whether the owner or the renter, you have to occupy full-time a unit, the principal unit in that property. But then you could rent out another unit.
Yeah, if you live in the basement, you rent the main floor out, or you live in the main floor and you want to rent your basement. Can you have multiple units? Like if you have a garage and you got a basement and you got your...
Yeah, that's a gray area? I don't think so. That's a gray area, which I don't know if they... I think you could interpret it to allow that.
Right.
But...
they could interpret it
differently, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but the idea is basically you got to be getting mail. You have to prove that it's your principal residence, so you should be getting mail there, ideally. So, and then you need the license,
and so it's a certain length of stay.
Yeah, so it's 28 days or under. Is the I'm pretty sure in Hamilton it's 28 days. Normally they do that because 28 days or under is short term.
Okay.
So this bylaw applies to stays of just 28 days or under.
Yeah. So if you do that's 29 or 30 days,
exactly,
you can run a purpose-built rental property just for Airbnb, and that's totally fine. It doesn't have to be your principal residence.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at that point it's deemed a regular long-term rental.
Right.
Right, and there's already regulations in place to deal with that. Like provincially regulated, so the city would have to really jump through some hoops to change that, to say, okay, anything under 6 months we're going to regulate, right?
Right.
Because I think you would have challenges, some good legal challenges for that at that point.
Okay, so if you are a landlord, you want to rent out part of your house, you can basically rest assured that you're still allowed to do that on Airbnb, moving forward, provided you get a license.
No, only if it's your principal residence.
That's what I mean. If it's your house and you want to rent out part of it.
Yeah, because that's the nice side of regulation is that there's certainty.
Yeah.
And so when we're looking at areas to invest or talking to clients where they're looking to invest in areas, it's better actually probably to have some regulation than not.
Yeah.
Because if there's not, then it's really unknown as to what regulation is what's going to come in.
Yeah.
It could be way worse than you thought, but if you've already bought a property at that point.
Yeah, so for folks in Hamilton who already own something and have to make a change, it's a bit of a disturbance and it's inconvenient, but for people looking to get into this space and try to do some short-term rentals, whatever market you're looking at, that's one factor to consider.
Yeah, so especially if you're a first-time home buyer, this is great.
Yeah.
Right? We'll see whether or not the regulations have any teeth. But the idea is it'll push out sort of investors and then orient it more towards owner-occupiers.
Yeah.
So if you're a young couple buying a house, then there should be less competition actually for for people looking to rent an Airbnb. So if you got a basement or a garage or something you want to rent out, that's awesome. right? Because now you do it all like above board. You get your license, get your inspections done. You're fully legal. You're in compliance, and you can go to town, rent it out as much as you want, and help pay. Because we talked about that with young folks in the market, right? Like this is one strategy, house hacking.
Yeah.
But now you could have like a really nice secondary unit on your property that rents out, like that pays your mortgage, kind of thing, right? So that is an option. So I do have to say though, June came and went. I think it was June 4th was the deadline. Came and went, and just before that they announced, "Oh, we're pushing it back to December." So December of this year.
Nice.
Yeah. So the the reason stated, and it this is the reason that was stated.
I tried to say that to the utility company when they went to go collect my hydro bill. So, I was going to pay it back. Yeah, I was going to push it back to December.
No, so there a memo went out, and the reason was that that staff had been encouraged or directed really to focus their efforts on renovictions. Which is a whole other topic, right? In Hamilton specifically. And maybe they realize this is a bigger problem than short-term rentals in here. And they already got all the press saying yep, we got this bylaw and it's going to happen.
If I think about the press side of it, it's more juicy to focus on renovictions, I think.
Well, they've already got the benefit of saying they did something. They passed this bylaw.
Yeah.
And now everybody, except for Airbnb, because it's such a small segment of the population,
Airbnb.
Everybody's going to forget about it. And as far as most people know, it's in place. Because I've seen this numerous times online where people are like, you can't have Airbnbs in Hamilton anymore. There's a law. Yeah. Because they read an article somewhere that said this is what's happening.
The bylaw. Yeah.
Yeah, or the bylaw was passed. But, they didn't say, effective this date, and then it got pushed back, right? So, but anyways, that's, it got pushed back in favor of policing renovictions, and it's my opinion, it'll probably get pushed back again, and if it does, it'll probably get forgotten. It'll probably just be discarded because there's only so much bandwidth, political attention that people have.
Yeah, if there isn't a big issue with Airbnbs between now and December, the likelihood of them keeping it on the table. And so of your clients, you sent out this memo to how many did some people take your advice and just keep operating the Airbnbs? Or
all
a lot
of them,
people?
yeah.
Okay, so they're all thankful and happy with it.
Yeah, because we got summer now in Hamilton, which is the peak time, right?
Yeah.
So all these people who, and a few of them I had kind of maybe online or whatever, just relax, guys, just wait and see what happens. I don't know if any of them took that advice, but our clients anyways are happy because it's status quo and they're making more money than they ever have on their rentals. So, and again, it's the same advice for December. Let's wait and see. Yeah. Because even from January to December to implement this whole program, doubtful that they would. And now that it's been pushed back, they're focusing on other stuff. Are they even paying attention to this? Is somebody working on it? I don't know.
Maybe we should do an episode on renovictions at some point. That's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
Because what we talked about earlier about how, if a landlord's getting paid rent, but the rent doesn't cover what he needs to cover to carry the property, he's less inclined to maintain it. Yeah. Right. So over the course of time, you end up with an affordable housing unit, right? Because the rent's low, but it's lousy and declining. And over 20 years, this thing could be absolute garbage. But the incentive is the landlord, I'm not going to fix, I can't, I don't, whatever, right? And you get in this little circle, this spiral of, hey, I don't have the money coming in. I can't afford to fix it up. And then it just goes around and around and around, right?
And so interesting you mentioned that. The prime example of that is government housing. Honestly, government housing is the worst. It's affordable. That's all you can say about it. It's the worst housing out there. Look at Toronto. Yeah. Absolute disaster. Yeah. Properties that are the roofs are caving in, just so
and they
poorly
can print
made.
The money.
Yeah, they should, of anybody who could do it. So for people who are government is the solution, no, it's not.
Yeah.
right? And are upset with private investors making money on housing. Like, no, they're providing a necessary service.
Yeah.
And like your units are like so much better than
I can't even afford to live in my unit.
that's true. But as far as like safe, good housing, that's it.
That's the standard you want to have.
Yeah.
And you want to create an incentive so that people want to provide nice housing, right?
Yeah.
And
so
otherwise,
anyways,
you're not going to create. So
there's a rant.
Is there anything else we could talk about with regulations? You have a couple of different cities named here with different.
Okay, yeah, because this is.
I'm learning lots, by the way, Mark.
Oh, I'm happy.
Good. Yeah, I'm not in the Airbnb space, so
yeah, there's a couple things.
I think if I was a young person, it would sound good. Like this sounds, hey, I could buy a property wherever in Hamilton, and like Hamilton specifically, right, with these regulations and the competition. Hypothetically, if this comes into effect, it could be lower and could be bode well.
Even if it doesn't, like it's still an excellent strategy, I think, for young folks. Because if you can, like any business, if you can run it well enough, you're still gonna do well because you're doing better than a lot of people out there, right?
Yeah.
As long as Airbnb's been around, there's still a ton of lousy units out, like a lot.
Yeah.
Like almost probably the majority are not professionally run.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you have to be a professional, but just that professional mindset.
Yeah.
That like you just need to have a good clean place and you're going to beat most of the other people in the market, and it's I think it's a great strategy for young folks in Hamilton. And because you also learn like some business stuff, some resilience, hospitality, all kinds of stuff that anyways, that's whatever, another episode. But yeah, let's just go quickly through some of the regulations in surrounding areas, because that's always the next question, right? Like if I get to Hamilton, where can I go?
Yeah.
And the answer really is like nowhere, not really anywhere. Right? So most places like Brantford, principal residence only, you need a license. St. Catharines, principal residence only, you need a license. And they have a snitch line for your neighbors to call.
Yeah, I saw that.
They put flyers out.
I got a property or a bunch of properties in St. Catharines, and then you get all these mail things.
Yeah.
I just send them to you.
Yeah, thanks. Toronto, we talked about that. Niagara Falls is interesting. It's principal residence only, plus specific areas, mostly like downtown. They have a zoning where it's allowed, which is pretty cool because we got a condo there that's being built, and that's in that area. And like they get it, right? Because they really
it's tourism.
It's tourist city. Yeah. That's all Niagara Falls is. I mean, they're trying to diversify, and we got rail lines in there now, which is pretty cool for commuting. But that's traditionally what it's been. So they understand that, right? So they want to balance, and like I think it's a good example of a decent balance. Like allow it in certain areas, right, and take those tourist dollars. But anyways, that's Niagara Falls. And there's a couple areas that don't have regulation yet. And like, who knows? So Burlington, they are working on it. I was a little surprised. I thought they would have been all over that, but no, they've been fighting over it for years. So it's coming. They're talking about it. There will be regulations. So get ready for that. And then a couple. So we have one property in Caledonia, and that's wide open right now. And I'm pretty comfortable that it will be for a little while, because they have more of a tourist mindset as well, right? Yeah. And there's, even if you look like online, they have a little brochure, and they almost encourage it. Like here's a guide for opening up a short-term rental, right? I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. So that's Caledonia, and then like Thorold is another example. Okay. It's wide open right now. Eventually, maybe they'll
tone it down.
They'll introduce something. So go into it with your eyes open if you're doing that. But there are still small spots here and there where it's allowed in this area. Yeah. So there's opportunities.
Yeah, I find it really interesting how every municipality has their own approach. Because obviously the province has their own mandate coming down, and then they all have to deal with an influx of population, and they have to deal with their limitations. But they all have their own approach in terms of regulating this stuff. Like one city, you say, is more they realize the value of tourism. Another cities like for example Burlington, I don't know what the tourism is like there, but like compared to Niagara Falls, obviously
Way less.
So then how you make your regulations kind of flows out of that, right? What kind of people you're getting in. Like you mentioned the story off the top of the show when we talked about the parties, like that was out in Burlington.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, interesting how everybody is trying to make laws to make it more difficult for everybody else.
Well, and like I understand part of it, right?
Yeah.
We should be responsible operators and hosts.
Yeah.
And if you're not, then like you're just asking for it.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe it's not warranted, but it's still your fault because if you have a party house.
Yeah, but in a place like Caledonia, like it's a little bit less density. Like you have the places along the river, and it's a little bit more laid back, I guess. So you're not dealing with as many neighbors complaining. Probably, I don't know.
Although, I mean, have you been to Caledonia lately?
Yeah, it's blown up.
Yeah, tons and tons of new builds.
Yeah.
So, who knows what'll happen there? So. That does bring me though to like, what do you do, right? If everything is getting regulated, what is your thing? So this is part of our strategy with our clients as well, is to look at midterm rentals.
Right.
So for most of our properties, we sort of have a hybrid model in place already, where especially in the slower times, we'll really, sometimes. It depends where we list, but we'll either focus or just allow longer stays.
Right.
And so I think for all of our properties, we actually allow stays of 28 days or longer. And then you kind of control that with your pricing.
Right.
Right. So in the summer, I offer no discounts or a very small discount for a month rental, so that it's impractical for someone to book one of these places in the summer for a whole month.
Yeah.
Now, if they do,
that's great.
I'm happy, right? Because now I got 100% occupancy as opposed to maybe 80%, and they're paying full price or a very small discount. So I'm still doing better than if I was renting it out like every 3 nights. But that's kind of the strategy, is to offer that, and then to be used to it, and then if we need to pivot, then we'll pivot to only
you're already kind of set
rentals. Up. Yeah, and there's not a ton of difference, but it's just sort of building up the experience and also building up reviews for longer stays, which helps as well. Because
so that's for somebody who's in the market already operating an Airbnb, and they have to deal with these regulations coming in. They're going to have to pivot. So you say, like, keep operating the Airbnb until the thing becomes effective. You think we can ride this out for a while, but then be prepared to pivot to something like a midterm rental with a longer stay, and try and implement that strategy now so you get used to it. But if somebody's getting into this and they don't have a property yet, or they're putting a unit in their basement or something like that, obviously that's fine. But if they're just going to buy a rental property, they should definitely seriously consider before they get into it.
Yeah, like anytime we're onboarding a new client, we always talk about like your plan B. I think we've mentioned this before, right?
It's good to say again.
No, we're good. Just have a plan B or a plan C. So if we're looking at opening a short-term rental, well, we're going to have a plan B, and that's usually a midterm rental. Will it work for that? So especially urban properties, right?
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about that with the screening, but with an urban property, it's different than a vacation rental, right? Vacation rental is pretty well, there's only plan A, which is vacation rental.
Yeah.
And that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And shorter stays, maybe a week, maybe 3 nights, whatever. But when we're looking at an urban rental, then I want it to be flexible so that if we need to switch to a midterm rental, we can. And generally, if it's okay for a short-term rental, it's okay for a midterm rental. Depending on your neighborhood.
You can always go long-term, eh?
Well, and that's the plan C. And I want to make sure that it's also suitable as a long-term rental.
Yeah.
So if you're buying somewhere in sort of a dodgier part of town, some people do, and they're like, it's okay, it's a short-term rental, whatever. People are only going to be there for a couple of nights. Not the best strategy, because if you need to change, well, that's even it's not great for a short-term rental, but less desirable for a midterm, and less desirable tenants for a long-term rental.
So if regulations kick into effect and you all of a sudden get closed down with your short-term rental, you're left with a house in the middle of nowhere or middle of a very poor area,
Yeah.
that you're not going to get a good long-term tenant.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you definitely want to prepare for that prior to going in.
Yeah, and then even just in thinking in terms of selling the property, like we don't ever recommend selling your property, but if you had to, is it the kind of place that you'll be able to sell quickly?
Yeah.
And be able to, make some, hopefully you do this initially, but, like do some landscaping, do some changes, add some value so that you get even more equity out of it when you sell, right? Or is it something you can like over time, over the year, like do one thing a year, and then in 5 or 10 years, you got a really nice property that if you had to sell, like you're good. The only problem you're facing is taxes.
Do we want to talk about taxes?
I never want to talk about taxes.
But the new regulations don't really, the tax is not really changing anything. It's still, we should bring an accountant on to talk about taxes.
Yeah, we should. I will say one thing: if you're doing a short-term rental, or even if it's part of your home, definitely talk to an accountant. But especially if it's a dedicated home, now you're probably you're changing how CRA looks at that property from like a regular residential rental to a commercial, to a business, which means that potentially HST is due upon the sale of that property. So before you get into a short-term rental, talk to your accountant and make sure that you understand all these implications, right? And that you're okay with that, right? If you can make a case for it's going to make me X amount of dollars per year, so if I ever do sell it, okay, there's HST, that's fine. We account for that.
Yeah.
Then, but that's one thing to think about. And then, HST in general, you should be collecting HST on stays of 28 days or less.
Yeah, because that's a big difference between short-term and long-term, right? Like if you're getting into a long-term rental, you don't have this tax.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because
it's a residential use. It's not a commercial use.
Yeah, there's regulations in place for that already. And I should just add that applies to midterm as well, right? Once we go midterm,
then you're fine.
We should not be subject to HST or any of those uses, right? Again, you may want to just talk to an accountant on the resale value of the home.
All right, so do you think we just end on a bang with this HST here?
That's more of a whimper, I think, isn't it?
My eyes started glazing over as soon as you said HST, or I was like, whatever, man.
Whatever, until you got to pay HST.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's the hard part, right?
And it's a
you
problem.
Forget about it. So talk to a professional.
Exactly. But I think that kind of sums up the regulations in Hamilton, anyways, and what I foresee is going to happen in some ways to deal with that.
No, I think it's very helpful and very insightful, and we appreciate you sharing that with us. If anybody has any specific questions, definitely feel free to reach out. hello@twostewards.ca. You can also contact Mark and check him out directly at Joy Hill Property Management. Yep. And we'll put some links to his stuff in the show notes. So thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.